שלום וברוכים הבאים. אתם יודעים, כמו תמיד אני מביאה לכם אנשים שהדעה שלהם והידע שלהם הוא כל כך חשוב ואיכשהו הם לא מופיעים במיינסטרים. אני נתקלתי במאמר מאוד מעניין על הנרטיב הפלסטיני. חקרתי, חפרתי והגעתי לפרופסור שכתב את המאמר הזה, ואנחנו כמובן הולכים לנהל איזושהי שיחה מאוד מעניינת, גם גיאופוליטית, גם היסטורית, אבל כמובן כל מה שקורה היום בישראל, ודווקא בגלל שהוא אמריקאי, אנחנו נוכל להבין את המערכת יחסים עם ארצות הברית. אז שלום לדוקטור אלכס ספיאן. Hello, Dr. Alex Safian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sharon. Nice to meet you in person finally.
Yes, that's true. Before we are diving in, I want you to introduce yourself. I'm not sure my audience know exactly who you are, and it's very important.
Well, I got my undergraduate degree at Columbia in applied physics and nuclear engineering, so I can speak with some firsthand knowledge about the nuclear weapons and nuclear technology issues that Israel and the Middle East are facing, and the US is facing with regard to Iran. And then got my PhD at physics in physics at Harvard University, and eventually switched fields by chance almost. I saw a very bad article in a local newspaper and decided to respond to it because it just was sort of triggering. And so in putting together, it was very anti-Israel, and it was all the reasons why Israel was not a good ally of the United States. And it's many of the same topics that you would see today, even though that was probably 35 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I got involved in putting together a response and looking things up. Still had access to the Harvard libraries, which are a great resource. A lot of things there that you still cannot find on the web, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. So that is what sort of got me into the pro-Israel and the pro-Israel, organizations and the pro-Israel environment. I'd always been pro-Israel, starting out with attending Hebrew school when I was a kid in New Jersey, very, very Zionist synagogue in those days. So just picked it up from there, and one thing led to another, and I ended up publishing something that refuted what that person wrote, and it was seen by a local pro-Israel organization, which at that time was just very small and kind of getting underway, and helped build that join that organization and help build it over more than 30 years into what was a very good pro-Israel organization. I am no longer with that organization. Various things happened at that organization, which is called Camera, which are very unfortunate and very damaging to the organization. But I am no longer there, and the person who built the organization, she didn't found it, but she built it, Andrea Levin, is also no longer there. She was fired from the organization, and I was fired 10 days later. So that's the brief story, and we're starting something new. We're not sitting back, and we're not just taking what happened as a final story. We're building a new organization, which is going to be better, certainly than what we left at Camera, and much better than what is at Camera now, called Foundation for Truth About Israel, or ftisrael.org. The website, we're so new, the website is not quite live yet. It's still a coming soon page, but the Twitter feed is live, the X feed is live, so you can find us there. And we're already underway. We're already writing articles. As you know, I had an op-ed in the Boston Globe in March or April.
This is how I met you on that.
Yeah, it was about how the claim that Iran, to have regime change in Iran would require boots on the ground, U.S. direct intervention. And historically, it's just not true. Yeah. And so I wrote an op-ed, which the Globe published. The Globe is the major newspaper in Boston. And the Globe published about why that's not true, historical precedent, and how it could be done. I didn't predict that it would be done, but I presented a scenario about how it could be done, which actually Israel was implementing that scenario at the end before the ceasefire. But unfortunately, Donald Trump went for a ceasefire. And also, unfortunately, the U.S. never did what Israel was doing to foster regime change in Iran. We can get into the details of that later. Yes, but the U.S. never took part in that, unfortunately. And when the Mossad head, David Barnea, just recently, finished his term in the handover ceremony, he again gave a statement saying he believes regime change is absolutely possible in Iran. He said it might take a year, but he thinks it's possible. Now, that was before the agreement with Iran and dropping sanctions, etc. So his opinion might be different now, that it'll be much harder if you flood Iran with money. And already Iran is offering through Hezbollah $1,000 to recruit new members in Lebanon for Hezbollah. So where's that money coming from, right?
You argued in your article that we can counter the Iranian regime using air power and pressure without a ground invention. And today, since, as you said, the U.S. In the negotiation with Iran, so how do you view this model, and do you think this negotiation are a mistake?
Yes, I think the negotiations are a big mistake. Contrary to what some people say, including our vice president, he said that, oh, the neighboring countries all support this and we trust their judgment being the best judgment here. Well, they don't support it. On the contrary, that's why the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had to do a damage control visit with them just a few days ago, trying to reassure them that they still had U.S. support and were not going to allow Iran to become even stronger than they were before and become even more bold, because previously they had never attacked these nations, Bahrain or UAE or Saudi Arabia. They'd never attacked them before. Now they've attacked them. So, you know, the precedent is there now that they have to worry about doing things and getting attacked by Iran directly. So yes, I think it is a mistake. I hope it's only short term until the midterms maybe, but we'll see. I don't know. I think Trump is listening to the wrong people now. I think Thomas Barak.
Who are they?
Thomas
Who are
Barak.
the wrong people? Who?
Yes, Thomas Barak, who is a
Barak,
billionaire and a big financial supporter of Trump. He's the U.S. ambassador to Turkey. He's of Lebanese heritage. I think in a lot of cases with these ambassadors, they kind of forget which country they work for. It ends up being reversed. Instead of being the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, he's more the ambassador of the Arab world, or some parts of the Arab world, plus Turkey, to the United States. And so I think he's giving very bad advice, and I think Trump is listening to it. And J.D. Vance also is still closely tied to Tucker Carlson, and I guess we all know what that means. And he never supported this war, so to put him in charge of reaching an agreement with the Iranians is unwise. He recently said that, oh, we're going to be hanging out in Doha with these IRGC guys in a few days. It's like, what? You're going to be hanging out with IRGC guys, the same guys who blew up Khobar Towers, who blew up the U.S. embassy in Lebanon? I mean, these are the same people, essentially, and that's who you're going to hang out. So it's frightening to see how policy can go wrong, but all is not lost. I would say all is not lost.
It's not lost.
No, the public still hates Iran, still hates the Iranian regime, maybe more than ever. They have to feel that they're being betrayed by the United States. I don't know how they could avoid feeling that. I mean, Donald Trump made a lot of promises just as this war started, just as this effort started. He made a lot of promises about, you know, the day of your redemption is approaching, and, you know, you'll be free, and you have to take this will be your best chance in 40 years.
Coming to rescue the Iranians.
Yeah. So I think they must feel betrayed. On the other hand, I don't think a regime that's unpopular can last forever. Again, history says no. They will eventually fall. They are not willing to spend money to produce water, for instance. I mean, you know, the mayor of Tehran was saying, I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, they may have to evacuate part of the city because there's not enough water.
Yes.
So how can a regime like that survive for very long? I don't think it can. So in that sense, I'm optimistic. On the other hand, are we really going to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon? Because I think they're desperate to do that. They could buy one from Pakistan. They don't even have to develop one on their own.
Yes. They can just transfer it through the border or through a boat. They can find all kind of creative way to achieve it. I heard all kind of scenarios, but if they want, they can do it. They can even hide it in the mountains. They have enough places to do it.
It's a big country. It's a big
Yes,
country.
exactly. The topography of the place is on their sides. They have the advantage.
Yeah. So, and there are also people mistakenly saying, well, it'll take them a long time to build a weapon small enough to put on the end of a ballistic missile. Well, yes, that's true. That would take a while if they didn't buy one. They had to develop themselves. But the bomb that was that we dropped in Hiroshima, the first bomb ever used, was huge. And it was very crude. I won't go into the details of how it was built, but you'd be surprised what sort of parts they scavenged in order to build the thing. It's not hard to do, to build a basic nuclear. Now, that weapon was not very efficient, and I think it only used up 20% of the fuel. The rest of the fuel was wasted, but it was enough to devastate a city.
Yeah, true.
So, yes, it would be crude, but they could do it. And then what? Right? And then what? And people don't take into account what an Iranian bomb would mean for Israel. Yes, Israel, in response to a nuclear attack, would devastate dozens of Iranian cities. But the most productive members of the Israeli economy, when faced with the possibility of a nuclear weapon blowing up in Israel, the possibility, may decide to move.
Yeah.
They would be some kind of exodus. They are wanted in Silicon Valley and all kinds of countries. They're very, very much in demand. And so those are the ones, not to question their patriotism at all, but they're the ones who could most easily move. A farmer can't move. A plumber can't move. But a high-tech person can move. And if you're faced with every day the possibility that a bomb's going to blow up that's going to devastate Tel Aviv, that's all the Iranians need, just a threat. They don't need to actually blow up a weapon. Just the threat would be a huge thing.
Yeah, but they are doing it almost for decades.
But if they had one,
yeah,
if they test one, the threat is much more real.
Yes, that's true. And they don't need much. We are such a tiny country. In a way, I'm trying to be optimistic and saying to myself, probably they don't have it. Otherwise, they were using it against us.
Well, I think if they had it, they might test it.
Yeah.
Just to make clear to everyone they have one.
Yeah.
But on the other side, U.S. intelligence has been wrong many times about other countries' nuclear weapons technology. We were very surprised when South Africa, when the apartheid government in South Africa peacefully left and exposed their nuclear program. They had devices on the shelf that were missing only, they never put them together. They never inserted the nuclear fuel, which they had, into the device. The devices were there. So they had a completed nuclear weapons program. We missed that India had one. We missed that Pakistan had one. We were very surprised at how far Libya had gotten along. They had A.Q. Khan's, the Pakistani father of the father of the Pakistani nuclear weapons program. They had his plans and they were advancing. So and they turned everything over to us. And of course, and in the end, Gaddafi ended up getting killed anyhow. So maybe he made a mistake, but he turned over everything to us. And we were surprised at how far along his nuclear weapons program was. The same thing, we did not anticipate North Korea's, how far advanced they were. So I do not have very much confidence in U.S. intelligence when it comes to knowing how far along a country is in its nuclear program. And the U.S. is saying that, oh, the Iranians stalled their nuclear program, paused it in 2003. I don't believe that for a second. Why would they? I don't believe that at all.
How come the intelligence of USA cannot see it? It's not something that it's easy to hide. It's remind me in a way our intelligence on October 7th, they saw, but they didn't see. What do you think is the reason for it?
I would say that one of the main reasons is the U.S. over-reliance on what they call national technical means, meaning electronic surveillance, rather than human intelligence, which we have downplayed. We very much went away from human intelligence and towards high-tech stuff. But the problem is, I mean, look how long it took to find bin Laden. Why? Because he wasn't using electronic devices. He was using couriers. He stopped using satellite phones when he realized they could be used, be used to locate him. He got off the internet. So when you look how much effort we put in to try to find bin Laden, and it took, I think, was it 6 years or something or more? And he happened to be with our quote unquote allies, the Pakistanis, who are now helping us negotiate with the Iranians, supposedly. Some allies, right? Like they didn't know he was there. Of course they knew he was there. So if you are very careful to hide things from electronic communications, and you know what satellites can do, so you hide it from satellites.
Yes.
It's very hard to find out. What you need are sources, which Israel has, which when it comes to Iran, obviously. The United States does not have when it comes to Iran or many other countries at this point, unfortunately. The CIA just got out of that business, which is a mistake.
It is. I agree. I think people need to be on the ground in order to understand what is going on. I don't think there is any technology that can replace human. And but Alex, I think the big issue about Iran and America, of course, is China. In a way, I don't think they care about Israel so much. They care, but this is not
Iran or
the
China?
real. Yes. So how does China, the way you see it, fit into the game between the US and the Middle East? And how does this global competition affect Israel, the way you see it?
Well, obviously China is an enemy of the United States. China wants to defeat the United States. China wants to replace the United States as the world's greatest military and economic force. Americans completely take it for granted that the United States is the most powerful country and the most powerful economy in the world, and it would always be like that no matter what we do, which is not true, unfortunately. The Trump administration has been very much against being the world's policeman. But what they haven't considered is, what if you're not the world's policeman? Who will be? And how would you feel about, in 10 years, Chinese aircraft carriers sailing off the coast of Virginia? That's what we usually do to other countries. But if we don't want to be the world's policeman and we don't want to spend the money, then there will be a vacuum, and the vacuum will be filled by China in alliance with Russia, probably, though the Russians don't have very much. And I don't know how much will we like being subject, it's called gunboat diplomacy, right? Going back 100 years, gunboat diplomacy, where some country gets difficult in their relations to the U.S., and we used to sail a battleship down and right into their harbor just to say hello and send a message. How would we like it if other countries started using gunboat diplomacy to us? That would be return to the War of 1812 or something, right? I mean, Americans are not used to that idea, but they take for granted that that won't happen, which is a big mistake, which is typical, but it's a big mistake. And so China is in favor of whatever is bad for the United States. So yes, they're helping Iran because that hurts the United States. On the other hand, China does not have the ability right now to intervene militarily, even if they wanted to. They don't have that
Sorry, I missed the last sentence. What did you say?
China doesn't have the ability to intervene militarily, say, to protect Iran or even to do demining operations in the Strait of Hormuz. They don't have that capability. They're doing their best to build it. On the other hand, China has a lot of problems. China is not, 10 feet tall by any means. They have huge economic problems that people don't pay attention to. All those ghost cities that they built. These are basically, they put a lot of money into building these cities that are now unoccupied, and a lot of Chinese would-be middle-class people invested their life savings in buying these real estate apartments, thinking they could sell them for a big profit, and it turns out they're worthless. So China faces a huge problem in that regard. And Xi, the leader of China, knows nothing about economics. He's just a bully, basically. He's barely ever been out of the country. So they have their own problems. We have problems. Israel has problems. The United States has problems. Western Europe has problems, of course. But let's not think that China is a monolith and is marching towards the future and has no problems. They have huge problems also. But we
Yes.
have to pay attention.
Yeah, I
So I
agree.
don't think I think, Israel has to be very careful in its relations with China. China has no history of anti-Semitism. That is true.
Yeah.
They have no indigenous religion either. But
Uh,
that
But
port
but
deal,
but I think they see us as the best, stronger America alliance. So I think this is why we become an enemy because of
a
America.
target. Yes, you become a target, of course.
Yes.
Of course. And so you have to be very careful in the deals that you make with China. The
Hmm.
Haifa port deal was a very, very bad idea,
I agree.
which the United States got very upset about. I'm glad they got upset. At least they're thinking, right? I don't know. Maybe Trump will think it's a good deal as long as he can get a part of it. I don't know. I say that because, when Iran said they were going to start collecting tolls, the first reaction from Trump was, oh, well, we'll take part of the tolls too. But
Yes.
then he got off of that pretty quickly, luckily. Sometimes you have to take into account that Trump maybe at 5 in the morning is sending out social media, but not necessarily what's going to be U.S. policy. So I
Yes.
guess we have to give him an allowance there. Um, but yeah, so China's a problem, and Israel has to be aware of that. And Israel being one of the major players in the world when it comes to cybersecurity obviously is faced with dealing with Chinese attempts to penetrate Western countries. And I think Israel has a huge market there and helping Western countries block Chinese attempts to penetrate them in terms of Huawei or other providers of, telephone networking equipment, et cetera, networking
Yes,
equipment.
telephone, right.
So again, the problem opens up also great possibilities for Israel.
I agree. This is the inner conflict, if to be more open to China or to be careful. But I
You have to
think
do both.
we need to, yes, exactly.
You do both.
If you already talked about the US politics, is Trump, the way you see it, is genuinely good for Israel in the long term, or it is more complex? Because some people in Israel think he's the best, some people think he's not, and some of them changed their mind after Iran negotiation and ceasefire.
Hard to say. He was better in the first term, I would say. Maybe because he had better people around him, he
Mhm.
was better in the first term. Tucker Carlson wasn't crazy in the first term, and the podcast, the people here are calling it Podcastistan, like it was, Pakistan, Podcastistan. It's some sort of South Asian Islamic country. Um, but it's hard to say. He's done a lot of good for Israel, no question.
Mhm.
He said a lot of nice things about Israel. He said a lot of stupid things recently about Israel, as has J.D. Vance, which makes you wonder, who it is they're listening to and what they fundamentally believe. I think Vance's beliefs are scary, as evidenced by various little things he says, like you can't kill your way out of every national security problem. Excuse me, like America, you mean? What do you mean? How is Israel trying to kill its way out of every national security problem? And he said Israel's a country of 9 million people. Well, maybe 5, 6 years ago, not today. So you're a little out of date also, just on the fundamentals. Get the numbers right, right? It's above 10 million now. So when a person says that, you wonder what's in their heart and what's really in their head. I don't think John McCain would have said that. I don't think Lindsey Graham would say that. I don't think Ronald Reagan would have said that. So you wonder what exactly is going on and who's feeding him information. And that's really a wider problem that we can
Mhm.
discuss. And that is, why the anti-Israel movement in the United States and why among young people especially is
Exactly.
it is it
Uh,
taking off?
mhm. You know what? I read some of your articles and your opinion, and you visited the protest at Harvard, and if I remember, you debated the students. It's interesting me very much. What did you see there from inside? Because
Well,
what we
yes,
see from Israel is probably different.
yes, I'm sure. I live very close to the Harvard campus. As I said, I was a graduate student there. I taught there for a while as an instructor. And so I still live in Cambridge, which is always interesting. Um, Not necessarily in a good way. And so, yes, when the encampment started, I have a Harvard ID. So they closed. Harvard Yard is encircled by brick, mostly walls and with gates. And it's not completely sealed. So people still threw things over the walls or put stuff through the gates, like tents. But they did restrict it to Harvard ID holders only, but I was able to get in. And so I went there every second or third day for the whatever 30 days that it was there, because just out of interest. I wanted to get a sense of who was there, what they were saying, what they were thinking, what professors were there, what was the nature of the thing. Okay. And um, I would say that, first of all, Harvard was not nearly as bad as Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
There's no comparison in terms of being radical and potentially violent. There were no episodes at Harvard like at Columbia with taking over buildings and essentially kidnapping custodians, which is what they did, even though they never prosecuted for that. They should have been. Um, Nothing like that ever happened. Nothing like that happened at Harvard. So it's very different environment, very different sense. One big reason for that is that Harvard does not have, for reasons I can't explain, does not have the kind of professors that Columbia has in terms of anti-Israel radicalism, right? There's no Rashid Khalidi at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
There's no Hamid Dabashi. There's no whatever Mamdani's father is a professor at Columbia. He's an extreme radical, anti-Israel radical. And various other professors at Columbia, extremely anti-Israel. And that encourages students to organize around the anti-Israel movement and also protects them from the administration, because it's one thing for the administration to deal with students, it's another thing to deal with professors who support the students and who tell the students how to do things and which administrators to talk to, etc. So at Harvard, that did not happen. There were bad professors, but there weren't as many and they weren't as radical. And I think that's one reason why the Harvard situation was not as bad. Now, as to the students, I did go there, and the second or third day I was there, um, I started asking them questions. And the first thing they said is, we don't engage with Zionists, which they're trained to say. They're trained to say that. They don't want to engage. But they're Harvard students, so if you ask them a few questions, they feel this unresistible urge to answer, right? That's how they got to Harvard, by answering questions. So they had to start answering. So I started asking them questions about Israel, about the Arabs, about the Palestinians, about America, about Native Americans, about the land you're
It
standing
was
on.
one-on-one or in a class? Sorry, I didn't
No,
understand.
it was about 5 or 6 at a time. And
Okay.
then when it was me against 5 or 6 of them, unfortunately, I was there by myself at that time, and there was
Mm-hmm.
nobody to videotape it, because it would have gone hugely viral had there been anyone there to video it, to
Yeah.
record it. So well, there were 5 or 6 students, and then when they were unable to answer sufficiently and they were exposed as knowing nothing, then they would bring over some more people. And so there were waves of students over the course of 3 hours coming to try to engage. And the net result was they knew nothing. I
Yeah.
asked specifically, at one point, I said to them, you think you're winning, but you're not. This is just, and then I quoted something from Shakespeare, this is just sound and fury signifying nothing. Now, I was in high school a long time ago, but everyone in my high school class would have known what that was from. None of these people knew what that was from. I just got blank looks on the face. So I said, okay, so that was from Shakespeare, and you don't know anything about that. But do you know Edward Said or Frantz Fanon? Oh, yes, yes. They had studied Edward Said and Frantz Fanon. So they don't understand history. If they take Edward Said seriously in terms of Orientalism and in terms of Palestinian history, then they're starting out knowing less than zero, basically. I mean, there's one thing not to know anything, but if you learn from Said, you know less than nothing, because you're filled with falsehoods and lies. And he knew nothing. I mean, Edward Said was no expert on any of these things. He was a professor of English who lived a very privileged life, both in Egypt and then in America. And he didn't know anything. He was not an expert, and he got exposed, and it didn't matter, right? And so now you have entire departments that basically are built around Edward Said's concept of Orientalism. And you have professors of Middle Eastern studies who don't know anything about the Middle East, who don't speak Arabic, who don't speak Hebrew, but they speak Edward Said. They speak Orientalism.
Unbelievable.
So that's a big problem. Okay.
But how do you explain it, Alex? It's like, sorry to say it, and I'm in Israel, so maybe it will sound rude, but how come they so dumb? How come they don't understand? They are learning in university. How come?
I told them, and they treated me with a lot more respect when I said I used to teach at Harvard. And I was honest, I wasn't a professor, I was an instructor after I graduated. I told them that you have been betrayed by your teachers in high school and here. You've been betrayed because you don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea. You have no idea about the history. And I said, do you realize there was a partition resolution that would have created a Palestinian state next to a Jewish state that would have been only 55% Jewish? The Palestinian state would have been 100% Arab, voted and passed by the United Nations, because they all love the United Nations. So I always say UN partition resolution, resolution 181, would have created a Palestinian state next to a 55% majority Jewish state. There would have been no Palestinian refugee problem, no refugees, no war in which 1% of the Israeli population was killed. And I said, do you realize what 1% means for America? That would be in a war in which about 3.3 million people were killed. It's an incredibly high toll. None of that would have happened. So do you think it was a mistake that the Arabs and the Palestinians turned down the UN and didn't create a Palestinian state back then? Well, that creates a huge problem for them. They had no idea about that. And it creates a huge problem for them. Do they say, yes, the Arabs and the Palestinians made a mistake? They can't say that. So it flummoxed them. It confused them. They didn't know what to say. Their picture of the conflict is that these European invaders somehow parachuted into Israel with huge support from the United States and American weapons, and defeated and expelled and raped and murdered these poor, peace-loving Palestinians. That is their picture. That's not their history. That's the picture of that's what they believe. And if you tell them otherwise, they get confused. But if you say, look, don't believe me, look it up. Right there is a Wagner library. The documents are right there. Look it up. Go to Lamont. Go look it up.
But they care. They want to learn. They have open mind.
I was only there. I wouldn't say they had open minds, but I was only there for a few hours. Did I spur them to?
But what were your notion? Your intuition.
I think they were shaken by the fact that there was so much they didn't know and so much that they assumed about the conflict. Here's somebody for the first time saying, no, that's not true. They've never heard anybody say that's not true.
This is unbelievable.
In their circles, they never hear it. They don't hear it in their classrooms. They don't hear it in their social media feeds. They don't see it on TikTok. They don't see it they don't even look at newspapers, but they don't see it on social media. They don't see it. They never see a contrary thought. And the same thing is true, for instance, of Mayor Mamdani the other day, saying he doesn't support Israel because it's an ethno state. We don't want ethno states. And he said, like Saudi Arabia, we don't like ethno states. And it's like, wait, you're in favor of a Palestinian state, which would be an ethno state, and Israel's not an ethno state, and here's why. And I can give him, 100 reasons why Israel is not an ethno state. But no one's ever said that to him. He's never had to confront those arguments. He doesn't know anything either. He was in Students for Justice in Palestine when he was in college, but he doesn't know anything. He can't debate those issues. No one's tried, unfortunately, and the members of the media don't know enough, even if they wanted to confront him. So he just gets a pass. He can say these things and people just accept it. And I think that's what has to change. People have to start confronting these people, but it takes a little bit of work, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, I mean, how much?
But Alex, our big fear is that these young students will be the next decision maker in America.
Of course, that's a fear. Of course.
This is the biggest fear because
Yeah.
anyway, up to now, I don't know, maybe you will say something else, but I think we lost the Democrats, and only the Republican are supporting us. And those young students are going to be the next generation as a decision maker.
Maybe. You have to understand, number one, what just happened in New York, for instance, in New York City, where three Democratic Socialists of America, three DSA members, and DSA is kind of not quite a political party. It's a movement which has gained a lot of notoriety and support in the last 10 or 15 years. By the way, it started out as a pro-Israel organization many years ago, pro-socialist, but pro-Israel organization. They were very close to Shimon Peres, etc., and the Socialist International, but that was generations ago. These people ran in blue districts, very, very liberal districts, and were able to win with low turnouts, right? We have primaries, which I guess, well, you don't really have. You have party primaries, but you don't have these kinds of primaries. In which there were actual, elections on election day, et cetera, and very small turnout. Maybe 10% of the population actually turned out. So the activists tend to win those, right? The people who are really the most active, the most committed, the most tied to, say, the anti-Israel propaganda and are energized by that, they're the ones who tend to turn out. So this has happened before. And in fact, this is how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got elected. She got elected against a very popular incumbent. She primaried him. He'd never had a primary opponent in like 30 years. And he did a terrible job in terms of defending himself during the primary. And she walked around, knocked on a lot of doors, had a lot of committed supporters, and she won the primary. Now, he was more popular than she was in the district. But because the activists had basically got out and voted, even though it was a very small turnout. So the same thing is true here. It's a very small turnout. However, the polling data indicates definite problems for Israel among these people. It's not as bad as, the people who got elected. They're crazy. And as I said, one of them is a student of Mamdani's father at Columbia. Yeah. So these people are crazy. I don't think all the people in the district are crazy. On the contrary, but it's not good for Israel. Definitely, the position of Israel has deteriorated. And look, I see conservative shows in which, what's his name? The guy at INSS, what was his name? Tamar Herman, the former head of Tamir Heyman. Tamir Heyman.
Tamir Heyman.
Yeah, yes. Who's now at INSS. And who was very confused by this questioner who was asking him questions the other day on American television. He was like making a face like, what? And this is not somebody who's anti-Israel who was asking him questions. It was essentially a right of center show on national television. Okay. But he was interviewed by her. And Meir Dagan, and he's obviously long gone. He was interviewed by her, and she had a lot of assumptions that he was kind of like, even though he's no supporter of the right or of Netanyahu, he kind of like was looking at her strangely. It's like, wait, what are you talking about? Because she was talking about how, well, this Israeli government and the way they're conducting the war. And if anything, many people in Israel thought that the war was not conducted vigorously enough, that there wasn't enough force, not that there was too much force. A lot of people felt, hey, get it over with. What are you waiting for, As if other leaders would have conducted the war differently. If you thought Bennett was prime minister, what do you think? It would have been roses and birthday cakes instead of bombs? So this ridiculous assumption when you have Bibi, who is the longest serving prime minister and elected more times than anyone as prime minister. Is he a dictator who doesn't represent the Israeli people, at least to some degree? So that's the kind of strange opinions you see here on political shows where you think people would know better, that no, Bibi represents a significant portion of the Israeli public when it comes to conducting this war. And some people think it's not enough. Some people think it's too much. So and so he was making faces because he didn't understand what she was talking about. They were coming from totally different places. But he again thought that the Iranian regime was not going to fall, and I disagree with him there. So in any event, there's a lot of misconceptions about Israel. The government is incapable of doing a good job in terms of getting the message out for, I think, in part for structural reasons. Israel has not had good hasbara since the days of the Labor Party, when the Labor Party was almost winning a majority, which they never did, but when they almost were winning a majority and they could pick their coalition partners, so they were not held hostage by coalition partners the way Bibi is. In those days, you had good hasbara and you had a unified message. Now Israel can't have a unified message. You have too many people speaking at the same time saying opposite things. And so you have, Eisenkot being interviewed saying terrible things about the rulers, and you have, Benny Gantz saying something, and you have Bennett saying something, and you have, Lapid saying something. So it's chaos, right? So the message coming out of Israel is chaos. And that hurts in terms of getting a good message across. And then you have people quoting, Ehud Olmert and not noting, oh, by the way, he's a convicted felon. They don't mention that. Just former prime minister says, yes, Israel is apartheid. And then he says, wait, I didn't say that, but it's too late. So Israel's got very, very difficult problems when it comes to hasbara and getting a message across. It's not going to come from Israel, a real message.
As you already said, and I agree with you, many former Israeli defense officials do.
Security,
yes,
security.
But you know what? Many of them do a private business worldwide. In weapon, in cyber, well, as you said, criticizing Israel policies in the media. So how does this combination of private businesses, if you know, and public statement damage Israel's strategies, image in the West?
It does. There's no question about that. But look, Israel had a good spokesman, right? And what's his name? I forget his name now. The guy that was speaking for Israel a great deal after October 7th.
Eilon? Eilon? Eilon?
Yeah. And he got fired. Why did he get fired? Is it because Sarah didn't like him or something? I don't know why he got fired.
I don't know either. I don't know either. But he was a great guy. This is for sure.
Doing a
I
good
don't know
job.
what happened.
He was doing a good job. And so what happens?
guy.
He gets removed and replaced by what? Essentially by nothing. So that's shooting yourself in the foot, as we say in English slang. You shot yourself in the foot by that. So why? Look,
but you know, this guy like Eilon is like a drop in the ocean because, you know what I mean, drop in the ocean?
well, I would say that you're right that Elon Levy maybe is not, I wouldn't say a drop in the ocean, but I think he had a very positive impact, but it's replaced with nothing. So,
Yes.
No,
I agree with you in this specific.
So it was damaging. Look, what was really damaging, one thing was losing Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
And contrary to what some people try to say, he was not souring on Israel. He was not changing his policies on Israel. He was the one person who was going on campus and taking on the anti-Israel crowd, among other things, and creating organizations on campus, Turning Point USA, that, among other things, were pro-Israel. No one else is doing that. And I don't know that anyone else can do that, even at Turning Point USA. I don't know that they have any. It's hard to replace him. So that was very damaging. But in the end, I'm an optimist. I think the anti-Israel movement in the United States is wide, but it's shallow. It's an inch deep at best because these people know nothing. So therefore, I think their minds can be changed by reality. The hard part is getting that reality across, and that's something we all have to work out here in the United States. I don't know what Israel can do better in that regard, because as I said, the situation in Israel is very difficult. But we can do better here in the United States. I have no question about that. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of days, there are going to be elections again, primaries, and I'm hoping that the DSL candidates lose. And I think there's a good chance of that. and not DSL, DSA, candidates lose. And I hope that that sort of blunts their momentum and people no longer think that they are the tidal wave of the future. And, people have pointed out that when faced with these extremists in your party, you have to do something. The Republicans did do something. They had extremist bigots and anti-Semites in their party back in the days of William F. Buckley, essentially the founder of the modern conservative movement. And he drummed them out of the party, despite it being difficult, despite him having to fight against former friends. He drew the line. And that the Democrats have not done. They are scared of these activists. They see that these activists have the energy in the party. There's no other energy. And so they're afraid to take them on. The only one in the Democratic Party, for the most part, who's speaking out against them is John Fetterman, which was a big surprise, of course. That's not how he campaigned, but that's how he's been. And very few of them, others, have done that. There was just a manifesto published by, I think, 13 Democrats. I'm not even sure who they were. It just came out. Fighting against these extremists and saying this is not the Democratic Party. This is not what the Democratic Party stands for. But look, we have a problem, right, of what young people believe and what people in America believe. They don't know, as I said 20 minutes ago, they don't know that one of the things you saw was the Nakba narrative is nonsense, right? They don't know that. They don't know how many times the Palestinians have been offered a state and turned it down. They have no idea. I remember seeing a debate. Ben Shapiro was speaking at some campus in California, and there was a black girl. I don't know if she was on the stage or just a questioner. She might have been on the stage. And he said something about the peace agreement that Israel signed with the Palestinians. And she said, there was never such an agreement. And there were enough people in the audience who knew, who just laughed. People just started laughing at her because in the worldview that she has, this view that she's constructed, Israel would never agree to a peace settlement with Palestinians. Therefore, when somebody says there was a peace settlement, her only reaction is to say, there's never been anything like that, because it completely contradicts her worldview. She has no facts. They don't bother to get facts. They have a worldview that allows them entry into a certain movement. And if they contradict that movement in any way, they're drummed out. Yeah. There was also, this interesting case of this student at Stanford, another black student at Stanford, who agreed to take a trip to Israel. She was very anti-Israel. And she agreed to take to Israel. I don't know if it was, I think it was a birthright trip. But she came to Israel and she saw for herself what Israel was like, and you see Israeli soldiers who look exactly like African American soldiers. And you see these pretty young Ethiopian soldiers in their uniforms walking around with guns. And you think, wait, I thought Israel was apartheid. Right? The picture destroys the claims. And then you go talk to Israeli Arabs who say that Israel is the best place to live for Arabs in the entire Middle East. That here, if something happens, they can go to the government, they can go to the courts, they can sue their Jewish neighbor, and they have a chance of winning.
True.
So, that's the reality that people don't know. But she came to Israel, she saw that, and she had enough integrity to switch sides and to come back and say it publicly.
Yeah.
And so
most of them don't even know where is the Jordan River and where is the sea. They don't have a clue. But how did Palestinians succeed in branding a fake history and erasing their own violence? I still don't get it.
Well, I think for one thing, the Palestinians all say the same thing. There are very, very few Palestinian dissidents. There's no Palestinian Norman Finkelstein or Noam Chomsky or you name it, right? There's nobody like that. They stick to the same story. They're very good at that. I mean, they're not, in a sense, brought up in a democratic polity. They're not brought up in a situation where there's opposition. So everybody has to be on the same side, or maybe you get shot in the kneecap, as has happened with West Bank Palestinians who say the wrong thing. So that's one way. The other way is the academy, is the academics, is the takeover of American academics, not just because of Qatari money, but that definitely helps, and that's more recent. That definitely helps. Look, it's a frightening data point to say that on October 7th, at about 5 p.m., 34 Harvard student groups put out a statement condemning Israel, saying Israel is responsible for the unfolding violence. And interestingly enough, that word unfolding violence you saw from, I don't know, 50 student groups across the country, because obviously there was a statement that was worked up beforehand that was spread to all these groups and then put it out. So on October 7th, before the killing is even stopped, you have student group at Harvard, 34 student groups. Now, some of them backed out afterwards. They said, well, we didn't understand, we didn't approve this, etc. But most of them did not back out. October 8th, you had massive demonstrations in Europe, massive demonstrations in London against Israel. So that's the environment that we're dealing with that was there beforehand, obviously before October 7th. This has been building. People talk about the situation at Harvard. Bill Ackman, the hedge fund guy, who said that, my daughter went to Harvard 5 or 6 years before this, and it was nothing like this. And I'm thinking, what? They had apartheid week each week. They had massive demonstrations against Israel at Harvard. And the Jewish students didn't do very much. They tried, they didn't do very much. I had another experience at Harvard right after October 7th. The Jewish students at Harvard put out large, Shabbat tables, symbolic Shabbat tables in front of Widener Library, and with names of hostages on the backs of the chairs. Mm-hmm. And people showed up. There were maybe 100 people there. And the head of the Chabad was there. And I happened to see standing right next to me the head of Harvard at the time, Claudine Gay. She must be about 5'1". She is tiny. And she's standing next to me. And I decided, well, you know what? I'm going to take the opportunity. I'm going to start talking to her. So I introduced myself. I said, I got my PhD here. I live in the neighborhood. And I said, you have a huge problem that you inherited. I said, you inherited a huge problem. I was giving her the benefit of the doubt. And that is that many of your students and many of your faculty accept all kinds of things about Israel that are totally untrue, that Israel's an apartheid state. They don't know that just the other day, a Druze colonel was killed fighting against Hamas in Gaza, that he was a hero of October 7th, and he died leading his mostly Jewish troops into battle in Gaza. And I think it was a Bedouin colonel who was killed up north against Hezbollah, if I'm not mistaken. And yet you have no idea that in Israel there are senior officers leading the fight who are Arabs. And at that point, she turned around and she walked away. She never said a word.
Wow.
She never said a word. She walked away. The funny thing is that some people were paying attention. I didn't even realize, came up to me and said, wow, that was really rude of her. And I said, yeah, you're right. That was very rude of her. But that's the situation we're in. She was totally incapable of dealing with the situation. In her mind, only Black people can be victims. And the Jews claiming to be victims is just sort of annoying and damaging to the story of the real victims, who are the Palestinians, who are Black people, etc. And they identify the Black struggle in America with the Palestinian struggle against Israel, as if it were a civil rights struggle. Again, having no idea about all the times Israel has tried to make peace and all the times the Palestinians have turned their back and many times responded with violence, as during the Second Intifada. Yeah. So that's the big problem we face, is one of education and getting people to speak up, right? Getting enough people with enough knowledge, and you don't have to be experts, but enough knowledge to say, no, that's not right. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? What about the partition resolution? What do you think about that? And they'll have no idea. So expose them. I mean, I think if enough people push back, that can actually make a difference.
Maybe we need more teachers and more books and more Jewish people, and not only Jewish people, but more people who's willing to share the truth. Maybe it's not easy to face it when they neglected to you, like this woman did to you. She just turned around and left the place. This is very rude. So it's not easy to come and share this truth about Israel. And you know, I think I don't remember if we talked about it on our email, but if not, I will talk about it right now. In the research on Nazi Palestine, we see the deep ties between the Palestinian leadership and the Nazi regime. Can you tell us more about this historical connection?
It's very important,
Yeah.
first of all, because as I said, the Palestinian cause is presented to all these various people who think they're leftists, who think they're progressive, as this perfect cause.
Mm-hmm.
The Palestinian cause is perfect cause. They are blameless victims of these rampaging Israelis who stole their country, who raped their mothers and daughters, who ethnically cleansed them, who murder them, who bulldoze them. As J.D. Vance said, you can't, kill your way out of every national security problem. That's kind of like saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality, of course, is that the founder of the Palestinian National Movement, the Grand Mufti, was a Nazi war criminal who escaped justice. He was indicted by the post-war Yugoslavian government as a war criminal. The Allies were not willing to indict him because the British still had hopes for him, strangely enough, as being useful to them in the Middle East. He wasn't, of course, nor was he useful before the war, of course. He betrayed the British after they empowered him. But yes, absolutely, we have to bring up the Mufti and bring up the foundations of the Palestinian national movement. We have to tell the truth and force people to deal with the fact the Palestinian national movement was born in sin. They were born in sin, which they have never dealt with. There's never been a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to expel, to somehow deal with truthfully about the Nazi basis of their movement. And not to mention the Muslim Brotherhood, of course, which is another major part of the movement supporting the Palestinians, including among Palestinians, but also other Arabs, was born out of European fascism. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas being born out of European fascism of the 1920s, and the Palestinian national movement being created by a Nazi war criminal. And yet they pay no price for that, right? They are viewed as the perfect cause, perfect justice. The Israelis represent evil. Those Jews who support them are evil and support genocide. And so the question is how to expose the reality of that. And I totally agree with you. There was a very astute Israeli person in military intelligence, now retired, Eran Lerman, very, very smart guy. And one thing he always said is always bring up the Mufti. And he's right, always bring up the Mufti. And of course, there have been a number of very good books written about the Mufti, but nobody knows about it. So yes, that is one of the things that has to be done, is bring up the Mufti, expose the Mufti, have an effort to, I don't know, to expose the Palestinian cause for what it is. No, if you want to be on the side of perfect justice, I'm sorry, you'll have to find something else besides the Palestinian cause, because that is not it. And the Israelis are not, as Bernard Lewis said about anti-Semitism, cosmic evil. Remember, the difference between anti-Semitism and other bigotries is anti-Semitism is viewed, number one, as a conspiracy theory. And, anti-Black bigotry does not think that the Black people are smart, or they're dangerous, or that they secretly control the media and the banks and education. That's what anti-Semitism does, right? It's not that Jews are stupid, it's that Jews are dangerous and smart and a conspiracy, as in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, to control the world. And so that is what we're dealing with. It's a very different form of racism than, say, anti-Black racism or anti-Asian racism. It's of a completely different nature, and therefore it has to be addressed differently. But we have to be aware of that. And making believe that it's the same and can be dealt with in the same way is a problem. So yes, we have to go on the offensive. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. But we have to, instead of just answering the critics, it's important to answer critics, But we have to go on the offensive. But one of the things that's very, very important is some people sometimes say, you're just preaching to the choir. You know, there's that phrase in English, preaching to the choir.
Mm-hmm.
But I always say that, well, you know, pastors and rabbis preach to the choir every week, and it's very important because if you don't preach to the choir, you lose the choir. And to a large degree, American Jews have lost a young generation of American Jews. We've lost the choir because we have not taught them. We have not preached to them. And the same thing is happening among evangelicals. People think of evangelicals being very pro-Israel, and they are. They have been, like, you know, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. He's wonderful. He's an evangelical. But the younger generation of evangelicals at the major schools for evangelical learning in America are turning anti-Israel. They are falling victim, and they want to sort of not be left behind their age peers in terms of being anti-Israel and being in favor of justice. I happened to be at a local block party here yesterday, and I started asking people, these are good people, okay, you want to say what Israel's doing is genocide? Tell me a war in the last 60 years that has not been genocide. Give me an example of how Israel should have conducted. Tell me a war that's not genocide.
Mm-hmm.
World War II? So I said, okay, the firebombing of Dresden, the firebombing of Hamburg, the leveling of Berlin. Do you think there weren't huge numbers of innocent people and women and children killed? So we call them the greatest generation who won World War II. Should we rename them? They're genociders, they're war criminals. Was Roosevelt and Truman and Eisenhower, were they war criminals? Because you're saying that Bibi's a war criminal, you're saying that Israel are war criminals. What about us? So tell me the war that's not genocide in your terms, right? What Israel's doing is not genocide. What we did is not genocide. But if you want to widen the definition, so Israel's guilty of genocide, tell me who isn't. What war is not genocide? And they can't answer that.
They can't answer.
Because they're not serious. They haven't thought the issues through.
Yes. Yes.
But that's what people have to say, right? You don't have to know very much to say that, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be a military expert to say to people, say Israel's committing genocide, to say, well, tell me, what war, in your opinion, was not genocide? Give me an example. That's one of the best questions people can ask. Okay, give me an example.
This brainwashing in the West, I cannot understand. They accept it, this genocide word, without even understanding. And they are accepting every fake video or picture, even videos that shown there is a snow in Gaza. Come on, check the weather.
Well, there's a very funny person on X, Rabbi something or other, who calls herself the Rabbi of Gaza, and she puts on being very, very left-wing, and she calls herself the Rabbi of Gaza. And some idiots actually fall. It's a parody account, but some idiots actually fall for it. So she's had invitations. She's sent invitations to, you know, to these progressive politicians to come on with her and do a program with her. She's the Rabbi of Gaza, and they take it seriously because they know nothing. But that's the point. If you know nothing, you will believe anything.
Anything, exactly. This is the point.
And so the problem is, why do they believe all these things? Because they know nothing. They have no foundation to test these ideas against, right? They don't know all the times the Palestinians have turned down having a state.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what Bill Clinton did and what he said afterwards to try to, you know, to create a two-state solution. There's just recently, there have been some interesting things happening. Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, who teaches at Columbia at the School of, I think, International Public Affairs. It's like the Kennedy School at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
So she's teaching graduate students. And she's had graduate students argue with her about events that happened that she was directly involved in as Secretary of State. And they don't know that. But she said they know nothing. And these are graduate students. Many of them are foreign graduate students, which you would think would be a little more sophisticated maybe than American graduate students. At least there's that feeling. If they have an accent, they must know something, that this is something Americans fall for. And she said they know nothing. She said this a number of times. There's video of her saying they know absolutely nothing. And I tell them, no, what you're saying is wrong. I was there. I was the one doing the negotiating. Yes, Bibi accepted the 10-month settlement freeze. Yes, he did. I was there. you know? So they don't know that.
They're just blaming Israel.
Yeah,
I can hear them saying it, like,
yeah,
we don't
you
need
know,
to support them anymore.
the US government sends as much money to South Korea as they send to Israel.
Mhm.
It costs us $3 billion a year to protect South Korea. Plus, we have 30,000 soldiers stationed there in probably the most dangerous place in the world, because if North Korea attacks, most of those 30,000 US soldiers will be killed in a very short period of time. They're there as a tripwire to make sure that if a war starts, the US has to be involved because we just would have lost 20,000 soldiers or something.
Mhm.
So when people say it's because of the Israel lobby that we give Israel all this money and they're running our policy, I say, okay, is there a Korean lobby that is, why do we give all this money to South Korea? Is there a pro-Korea lobby, or is it in our national interest? Right? So it's obviously, we believe it's in our national interest. And the beginnings really of the strategic relationship between Israel and the United States, where the United States started to supply Israel with weapons, was under Richard Nixon as president after the Black September crisis, in which Israel and the United States saved Jordan from a PLO Soviet attempted overthrow. And Israel is the only country that stood by the United States. Our European allies stabbed us in the back, basically said no, they wouldn't help, and they wouldn't even allow us to use forces, our forces stationed in Europe, to help prop up the king. So Israel ended up doing the major work. And that's when the U.S.-Israel relationship really took off, and we decided to start selling F-4 Phantoms to Israel, etc. It happened under a president who got no Jewish support, no financial support from the Jewish community, essentially. So he did it for interests of national interest, not for money, not for politics. It was a hard-headed national security decision in the interests of the United States. So people don't know that. Okay, people just
They
don't
don't
know.
know even that we won big wars without any help from America. This is also a very interesting fact they don't know.
No, they assumed that, as I said, they assumed that Israel was lavishly supplied by
Yeah,
America in 1948.
yeah,
And they don't realize in 67, what were the major weapons? British and French.
yes.
And you won despite the French embargo, the very nice French embargo that de Gaulle put in place
Sure.
during that war. So yes, they don't know that. The assumption is Israel wins because the United States supports them and supplies them, and the poor Palestinians are on their own, and so they keep on losing. Um,
So maybe America need to stop, and then we will show them that this is not the case. But anyhow, Dr. Alex, do you have any message for the Israelis, something you think they need to hear or know?
well,
We are in a hard time right now. We have like we are, I don't know, already 3 years of a war.
well, the 3 years of the war, I think, is an Israeli mistake, by the way, a major mistake of not
Why?
realizing
Why?
that you have to get it over quickly and you don't have forever to do this. And this is a very surprising mistake by Israel, because in the Six-Day War, for instance, Israel took into account, Rabin took into account that the great powers might intervene and force a stop. So make sure that you have things you will achieve after day one and you have things you will achieve after day two, just in case
Mhm.
they force a stop. But Israel didn't seem to have any sort of strategy like that in dealing with Gaza. And so it's almost going to be 3 years now, and it's not finished yet.
Yeah.
And you're counting on some sort of agreement to disarm Hamas. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Mhm.
So, yes, that was a major Israeli mistake. I think, I'm not 100% positive, because maybe the Israeli army isn't actually big enough to have completed the operation within 6 months or 8 months. That's possible. As they say, small, smart army, right? One
Yes.
of the
The biggest mistake, you mean?
maybe, I don't know. I mean, this goes back to Barak as maybe chief of staff or defense minister, small, smart army, no more big wars, no need for big armored forces. We just need commandos like himself.
Only
And,
seven front. No, we don't need a big military
yeah, so that was that. Maybe
sophisticated.
that's why they didn't try to end it in 8 months. Maybe they didn't have
Mhm.
enough soldiers. I don't know the answer to
No,
that.
we had some problems. We didn't even have enough weapon to put inside the tanks. I don't even want to say all this, how will I say, it's not mistakes, it's, you know the word in Hebrew, שערורייה?
No.
שערורייה.
Was it dirty laundry? You don't want to
It's a
expose it to the
שערורייה.
outside?
I think even if we will check it for years, we won't understand what really happened.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a deep scandal that I don't think we will ever know the truth. This is how I see it.
It's quite possible. Who knows? Strange things happen
Yeah.
in Israel, so who knows? But yes, so Israel made a lot of mistakes, obviously, and you talked about the intelligence mistakes, and just like in '73, there were people raising the alarm in '73 that were not listened to. And here, people did not take the Palestinians, did not take Hamas seriously enough, and thought, yes, they have the desire, but they don't have the capability. Well, if you have nobody there on the border, they do have the capability. And I remember visiting the border and looking at that fence and thinking, how is this going to stop them? If they really try, how is this going to stop them? Especially if you have no, soldiers there. And the answer was, there are things you don't see. Okay,
Yes.
well, I just
I don't know if they didn't care. I don't know if it was on purpose. I don't know exactly what happened. I don't think we will ever know, but maybe it was combination of many factors together. Probably this is what it was. In Israel, some of us think there was some traitors from inside, but who knows? Maybe one day we will know. I don't know. I'm skeptical about it.
I don't believe that, but I have a question.
Yes, please.
And I think this is a very important question that people aren't asking.
Yes.
As far as I know. Why did the senior officers not inform Netanyahu or Gallant on that Friday night? And they didn't.
Wow.
I know why. Because
Why?
they were afraid.
Why?
They were afraid that Bibi would do something, in their view, unnecessary, mobilize, maybe strike first, for political reasons, quote unquote. Therefore, since they knew better and they knew that nothing was going to happen, they didn't tell him.
I don't know. I don't know. There are so many opinions about it.
Well, if he listens to his security advisors, the senior security officials, then that's his problem. If he doesn't listen to them, then it's the same thing. Why didn't he listen to them? If he does listen to them, then they blame him anyhow.
Exactly.
I do think it was what I said, that they were
Yes.
afraid he was going to do something, in their view, unnecessary. Therefore, don't tell him, because he'll do something for political reasons that's completely unnecessary. He'll escalate the situation. Nothing's going to happen. The Palestinians just want more worker permits and more money, and that's all that's really going on.
Sometimes it surprises me how come people from outside, from overseas, understand Israel better than some of the Israelis.
Because it's hard when you're in Israel. There's so many things happening. It's like, as they say, sipping from a fire hose.
Yeah, probably this is
We
it.
once had somebody. We visited some friends.
Have you been in Israel, by the way?
Of course,
Yes.
many times.
Okay.
So we were visiting some friends in. I'm forgetting the name of the town now. It's the town where Barak used to live, where a lot of retired, where Ehud Barak used to live, in this town right near the border. Right? And so we're talking to some friends. These people had been Wexner Fellows at Harvard. And so that's how we became, not me, but other people on our trip had become friends with them. And I always remember that we were talking about various things, and we were talking about, Israel supplies huge amounts of water to the Palestinians, which is true. Israel doesn't steal water from the Palestinians. It provides water to the Palestinians. Yes. Yes. So they live there, very nice town, but they don't realize how close to the Green Line it is, number one. But so we were talking to them, and we're talking, I think, about water or something, and they thought, oh, Israel is, not giving water, stealing water. I said, no. Israel is giving water. And the wife eventually said, well, we can't follow all these things because we're too busy here in Israel. which is true. I mean, Israel, look, 2 days in Israel is like a month in the United States in terms of things that happen. Things happen at tremendous speed in Israel. It's just amazing. Not just technology, but politics. Everything is a rush. Everything is at, and
We're living on speed.
yeah, and so things happen very quickly in Israel, and things develop very quickly, things change very quickly. And so it's hard to keep up. It's definitely hard to keep up. And, one of the great things about Israel is it's the only Western country that actually has a high birth rate, and not just from the religious, but from the non-religious.
Sure.
And so this is a problem that people recognize in the West, but they never say, what can we learn from Israel? Why is Israel such a country where people have a cause and they're still optimistic despite being bombed from all directions and being invaded by terrorists and the suicide bombings of years past? Despite that, Israelis are, top 10 in terms of the happiest country in the world. So that's maybe upsets Israel's enemies, that people are optimistic and plan for the future, which is having children, is planning for the future, believing in the future, and our happy country, despite all this stuff, must drive the anti-Semites crazy, right? So that's one good thing about it.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I love my country. I love my people. I do think it's not easy to live in Israel, but I won't replace it. I had so many options during the year to leave Israel, but it was never an option for me. I'm optimistic too, despite everything that happens to Israel. I think the people can overcome everything. I believe in the people. And I even think the argument and the conflicts between ourselves, it makes us sharper and smarter and stronger. And I don't think there will be ever a civilian war between us. I don't think so. Some people think, I don't think so.
But, Yoni Netanyahu said, the war of the Jews is the worst war of all. And that is true.
Yes, I agree.
The disagreements and the baseless hatred, to go back to, biblical times, the baseless hatred, opening the door for the enemies.
I agree.
But hopefully that will not happen again.
I choose to believe in my people and hope for the best, of course. And Dr. Alex Safian, it was my pleasure to discuss with you. Thank you for your time. And next time you are coming to Israel, please come to Northern Israel. I'm going to show you around. I'm living, the Golan mountain is behind me, and my village is upper the Sea of Galilee. So it's the best location in Israel.
Yeah, I've been in that area a couple of times. I won't say who I was visiting because that's secret, but yeah, so that's...
So you are welcome to my area and welcome to Israel, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. I hope that with our new organization, FT Israel, we will once again arrange for FT Israel this time to come to Israel with our board and meet with officials, etc., and make contacts. And so, yes, I'm looking forward to that. Absolutely.
Yes, please let me know when you're around. Maybe I can assist also.
Absolutely. My pleasure. I'll be in touch.
Yes, of course. Bye, Alex.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
זה היה עוד פרק של דרך המחשבה. אם אתם פה ביוטיוב, אז כמובן אתם מוזמנים ללחוץ על הפעמון, וכך אתם תקבלו עדכון ישר על כל פרק חדש שעולה. אם אתם באפליקציות, תסמנו לנו 5 כוכבים, תכתבו, אני קוראת את כל התגובות שלכם. ואם אתם רוצים עדכונים גיאופוליטיים אקטואליים, אז חפשו אותנו את הטלגרם של דרך המחשבה. אנחנו נתראה בפרק הבא.